Hey everybody, it's Romania Black. We are on episode 7 of Stars Align, and last time we were in the midst of our game against Misaki Academy, and our boys were actually doing pretty good. I was actually surprised that they were winning a set each in the games. I mean, granted, none of them won a whole game, but I mean, they're the championship team, and our boys are the underdogs of the underdogs. So the fact that they even won a game against this group is pretty impressive. And so it had been that way up until Toma and Maki started playing the ace of the Misaki Academy and his partner, and that hasn't gone great so far. So they've not won a set yet. So my hope is that they at least win one set, and then that would mean that all the pairings would have done so. But I have a slight feeling that they're not going to win a set, and that's going to be kind of the lesson that even your ace team, because Maki and Toma have kind of been built up to be like the ace team, even that isn't always guaranteed a victory. And so I'm hoping that we get some of that kind of thematic elements thrown into this series. But the last game was there wasn't too much to talk about other than the gameplay, the pairings, kind of the personalities playing off one another. But something I really like about this show has been the animation and how every character and every pairing has been individualized. It's not just like stock animation that they keep reusing. Everybody has their own moves, their own animation quality and style to it, and it makes it very unique and fresh, which I really like about this series. But yeah, so we're on episode 7. We're past the halfway point, and it doesn't feel like it. It feels like we're just starting the show. And so, like I commented in the last episode, the fact that this cuts off after episode 12 is a real shame, because I feel like this is the beginnings and the workings of a series, and the fact that it's not finished is still very disappointing, but what can you do? So, gonna enjoy it for what it is, but I'm excited to see what happens in episode 7. I hope you all are too. But with that being said, let us examine Stars Align episode 7 and see what is happening, and see how our boys fare against the old Misaki Academy ace team. So we're gonna do that here, y'all. We are gonna start episode 7 of Stars Align here in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's go. Okay, so this has probably been my favorite episode of the season so far. Without a doubt. This has been my favorite episode. I absolutely loved every second of that because it was so sweet and so cool. I'm going back through because there's little parts that let me turn the sound off. There's parts that I didn't want to forget. Like Yuta praying for Toma and Maki to win, which they got really close. Like, that was such a good game. Oh my gosh. But the idea of Mitsu, of Arashi, of the post-game barbecue, of Itsuki, the ending here, the sponsor, everything. Oh my gosh. The animation in this episode was hands down the best it's been all season. And I loved the back and forth, the camera movement, the ball, the slow motion, everything was so good. And just getting the dynamic of Arashi being this hot-headed, even their own coach called him Prince OG. Like, just the idea of this kid being hot-headed and wanting to control everything and do everything by himself on the court. But how he is off the court is kind of different. And I love that we're going there, that we're talking about this, and how people are different on the court versus off the court. Like, I really, really like that. And how he finally, discovered the power of teamwork in those last few moments with the other boy. Oh, is it Sawanaga or Sawaga or whatever his name was? And Maki and them talking about it. And Maki kind of doing big brain strategy, being like, no, Sunaga was treated as an accessory or a spare part, not as a doubles partner. Like, I love that line. And Toma not realizing it, and Maki being like, no, he's not being a team player, he's just wanting to control the game. And then Toma asking, but is the better player taking the lead not a good thing? He's like, no, it's fine if you take the lead, but leading and controlling are not the same thing. And if you don't recognize your partner and their strengths, then you're not gonna be able to play to them, and it's gonna become a weakness. And I love that. I love that strategy, and them talking amongst each other and seeing the other side where Arashi and Sunaga are not talking to each other at all. They're distant. it's such a great visual metaphor. And then by the end of the game, they did start to work together, and that kind of turned the tides on the game. But oh my gosh, so good. Like, I love just the way that the eye movement, the way everything works. It was so clean and crisp. Mitsu's whole attitude this episode, and the last couple of episodes we've seen Mitsu kind of change. I wanted to make note that I'll put your name up here. Another YouTube commenter noted, and I don't have it in front of me, I wrote it down, but noted how Mitsu is kind of like a stray cat. Like, you know, if you've ever had cats before, we've had cats inside the house and outside the house growing up. But if you find a stray cat, when you first encounter them, they're like, when you first encounter a stray cat, it's kind of doesn't want anything to do with you. It's not friendly. It kind of like hisses and goes away. That's Mitsu. But the longer you're around that cat, and the more that cat becomes comfortable with you, the more it kind of starts to ease out of its shell and come towards you, and eventually let you pet it and be friendly towards you. And that's kind of Mitsu. Mitsu's like a stray cat that Maki kind of picks up at the apartment, and she kind of eases her way towards the team and kind of warms herself up to the team. And by the end of this match, she's like doing the fist thing. She's like, she wants to know, like, what's the final game? How does that work? Which is kind of like very volleyball rules-ish, that you go up to 7 and you have to win by 2 points to win the final set. But she kind of warms up to the team to the point where she's like going to the barbecue with them, like she's been invited this whole time. And I love that. I love that Mitsu has gone from being this character that's so negative. Like, she's not totally changed. At one point, she's like, well, you know, just because you work hard at it doesn't mean that you're going to succeed. And I think that's a valuable lesson too, because it's so true. You can work really hard and put in a lot of effort, and it does not mean you're going to be rewarded. I mean, her words are that you're rarely rewarded for hard work. I would say you're not always rewarded, because I think hard work, you do get rewarded in most cases, or in many cases, but not always. And I think that's an important thing for them to kind of note here, that just because you've practiced every single day doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to win the game, because other teams have done just as much. There is some kind of raw talent that is part of it. And Arashi even notes that at the barbecue. He's like, you've only been playing a month and you're this good? So there is some kind of talent involved in it. But I love how positive the whole team is, even after losing. And Maki, you know, Maki started playing this game to make money as a bet. And now at the end of it, he's like, it's okay that we lost. It was fun. I had fun playing. And it's like, yes, that's like the whole point, is that they had fun playing whether they won or lose. And you get the impression that Toma is not used to that either, because Toma has had this mindset from episode 1 of our success is our merit. Like, we aren't going to be a good team unless we win. And Maki's like, but having fun's a big part of this as well, because we're not always going to win. And if we get anything out of it, let's have had fun playing the best that we can. And I love that. I absolutely love that. But man, just the episode, most of it being the match, it was so good. And leading up to that final set and them just running them ragged, to the point where I loved that the episode, there wasn't any soundtrack anymore. It was so quiet. It was literally just them back and forth, and everybody on both sides was just so wrapped up in the match and watching, and you as the audience kind of get wrapped up in watching it, and you're like, oh yeah, there's no sound, it's just the ball getting hit back and forth. And it was so captivating and so good. I loved it. I absolutely loved that match. Like, that was probably one of the better sports anime matches I've watched, because I was just so caught up in it. And it's middle school soft tennis of all things. So yeah, but that's not even where the episode ends. Like, they went through the OP without the OP, and they even went through the ending song, and you're like, okay, where are we going, episode? And we finally get to the end of the match, but that's not really the heart of it all. The sponsor even noting the weaknesses and everything, but I love that the team, and that final ball dropping, that the team's like, man, we were so close. And Maki gets kind of inspired by that. Maki's like, oh, we can improve our endurance, we could do this, we could do that, you know, what practice strategy should we do? And everybody's like, you know, don't get crazy, Maki. But Maki is inspired. Like, you can tell he's really wanting to get involved in more practice matches, keep the practices going. And then the other teammates are inspired too. They're like, we need to run more in our matches. We've got to outlast the opponents. Do we want to run the grounds? Like, they've done a whole 180. Like, this practice match has like transformed them from being a team that was going into this match not knowing if they were going to win or not and being like, I don't know, maybe we'll try our best, to being a team that wants to win, that is inspired to. But this locker room scene that happens after the match, the whole moment of all this, and you got the two Chads like just doing the stretches and stuff, but the biggest moment, I think for me, one of the biggest moments this episode was the amount of trust that Itsuki gave Maki. Like, Itsuki comes in to change and everybody's like, what are you doing? And he just acts like it's no big deal, and it's so quiet, and he like cracks his neck there. And then Shingo says Itsuki, but he's like, nah. And you see that whole scar that takes up like half his back, and Maki just kind of smiles like okay, you trust me, cool. And he's like, hey, you want to try out this new trick? And just doesn't even bring it up, like just acts like it's nothing. And Itsuki, that's all he wants, is just that acceptance, that Itsuki's like, you're not going to judge me or ask questions or make me feel uncomfortable. It's just instant acceptance and tolerance. And that's like my heart, like just soaring from that moment. That was so good. I love that so much. But yeah, so I kept thinking in this episode, that they would challenge maybe the girls team for a practice match, because honestly, I mean, the girls team would be a lot harder because they're in high school, aren't they? They're not middle school, or maybe they are middle school, but I figured they would challenge them next. But we didn't get to that point. And so they're going over all these strategies and everything and having a meeting, and Mitsu's just sitting there like, what are you boys doing? Like, come on. And they're just going over all of these different plans. And then the idea that Yuta and Rintaro have of taking everybody's ideas and making a training schedule, this is interesting because I didn't really note it in the episode because it was happening all at once. But up until now, Maki's kind of made the training menu for them because his strategies have worked. So he's kind of been in charge of everything. But this is the first time that, Maki, you're part of a team, so now you've got to take the team input as well. So Yuta and Rintaro and the others are offering like, hey, we all have these ideas of what we should do as a team to become stronger. Let's put them all together and make a schedule, and everybody contributes. And for Maki, you can just tell looking at him in the episode, it's not sure, because that's relinquishing control, right? And we established way back in episode 3, that part of Maki's whole situation is that he has had very little control in his life. Like, his father has been like coming into his life and uprooting everything. He's not had control over where he's lived, over, his mom and dad's situation. And so him like doing the cooking and doing these other activities and having control over those has been kind of his way of dealing with everything around him. And so this idea of everyone contributing and sharing that control is something new to Maki, and something that's going to kind of prod at that comfort zone, right? And at first he's kind of like, well, he's like, we can't neglect practice, but we've got this. And Toma kind of challenges him. He's like, are you against it? Are you against everybody contributing ideas? And the whole team kind of looks at him and he's like, well, no, and you can tell it's just him breaking out of his comfort zone. And he's like, well, and he's trying to compromise. You can see the wheels turning in his head. He's like, well, there's got to be a better approach than just more practice. But he can't think of anything. So it's interesting that he's trying to do that. That's so cool. And then, of course, Taki, the art sponsor, comes in at the right opportune moment to kind of ease the situation very conveniently. But I think that's an interesting parallel between Maki and Arashi, because on the court, it's funny. It's a contrasting thing, right? Because on the court, Arashi is really controlling, like we've seen in the match in this episode. He's controlling and wants to control everything on the court. But then when we see him outside the court, he's totally chill with hanging out with everybody and contributing and helping out. Like, he's totally for the collaboration after the fact, off the court. And with Maki, it's kind of the opposite. On the court, Maki's all about teamwork and collaboration, but it's on the court, so it's in a contained environment. But outside of that, in the real world, he kind of wants to control certain elements of his life. So it's a really cool contrast between these characters, especially later on when we see them interacting at the barbecue together. I mean, they sit right next to each other, Maki and Arashi, and have all these moments with each other. So that's really, really interesting. But I like the art sponsors, his message here. He's like, hey guys, he's like, don't overdo it. He's like, I know you just had this practice game. Y'all did good. You're all fired up. You're ready to go. He's like, but the last thing we want to do is burn you out and get somebody injured. So he's like, let's take a break and have like a picnic instead. What if we had a picnic and just kind of hung out this weekend and just did something fun for the group, which really pisses me off because then at the end, they're like, one of the parents was complaining that they had practice on Sunday and it was too much, but they didn't have practice on Sunday. They went to the barbecue. So I'm like, whose parent is complaining? Is it Toma's? Is it Toma's parent that complained? Is it Rintaro's? Is it Yuta's? I mean, Yuta wasn't even at practice, but he was there. That really takes me off that a parent is like complaining that there's too much practice. Like, you did that before going to the sponsor? Really? Really? And I like the teachers, and they all look at him like, God, you're lame. I love it. But a riverside barbecue. And they're all like, okay. I doubt it was Itsuki's parent that complained. Maki looks super excited about the barbecue, though, because it's a chance for him to control something. He can control the cooking aspect of it. And also, I said in the last episode about Muro, who's the girl coach sponsor, her and him maybe having a thing. He borrowed all of her stuff for the barbecue. So, is there something going on? Who knows? Who knows? But I find that interesting that she loaned him the cooler to pack the meat. And of course he brings not only meat, but boar and venison from like his friends that he's gotten for the barbecue. Yeah, there's game meat too. A friend of mine sent me deer and bear meat and boar meat. Yeah. So, I like Mitsu showing up. I like the whole gang all there. That's really good. I really like that. I never in a million years imagined that Arashi would show up with Kamui the dog. I never imagined that would happen. And I honestly thought that at the beginning of them meeting up with him, I thought it was going to go one of two ways. Either he was going to see them all there and be like, oh, look at the team. Here's how I thought it was going to go down. I thought he was going to see them all at the barbecue and be like, oh, are they celebrating? They lost to our team. Like, why are they celebrating and having a good time? And I thought he was going to go down there and trash talk them and cause a dramatic ruckus. That's what I thought was going to happen. And then that's not. He was like, oh, hey, look, it's those guys. We're having a barbecue. I'm going to go hang out and be social. I was like, okay. And then when he first shows up, the team, like Shingo and them, get kind of defensive. And they're like, why is he here? Is he come like, how dare he come by himself? But Maki's like, no, hey, you want to hang out? And hang out with us and eat food? And he's like, okay. And that's it. That's so refreshing. Because when you see Arashi in this episode, you think he's going to be this big bad rival to them. But he's not. He's just a kid. They're just middle school kids. And he just happens to be in the area walking his dog. And he just wants to hang out with them and be friendly with them. And that's so freaking cool. And I like during this whole thing that we get a little bit with Mitsu and her eating, and she's like really having a good time and eating with them. And Yuta makes the comment, he's like, well, you normally don't eat a lot during lunch because you don't look like you're having a good time. And you can kind of see in the flashback here where it does the spotlight on her, there's Yuta and Maki over at the other table. They're not sitting with her, but Yuta's looking over and he sees her by herself at the table with eating alone and eating, you know, like seeming sad because she doesn't have anybody to talk to. And here she's with these people that she's comfortable with, and it's a totally different environment. So that's really cool. And there's like a little bit of talk kind of like of gender norms, because the one brother's like, my sister eats a whole bunch, and the other boy's like, my sister eats a ton too. She eats like 5 meals a day. And they're like, Mitsu, you can eat food. Because for a second I thought she was maybe gonna feel like embarrassed because there's like a cultural stigma of women body types and like how you don't pig out in food and you don't want to seem like you're like, I feel like in high school and middle school, girls like kind of trash talk each other in a lot of situations, and body image is a big deal. And so I thought they were going to go that route, but they kind of don't. They're like, you can eat some more meat. It's fine. And she's like, you guys aren't making this fun. Like, don't single me out. Like, she doesn't want to stand out. She just wants to be part of the group. She doesn't want to be singled out because she's a girl or for whatever reason. So I'm glad they went that route and they didn't go that melodrama route with it. But then, yeah, they recognize that Kamui's there, and Arashi just comes up like it's nothing, like, hey guys, what's up? And they're like, oh, you want to hang out with us? And then he does. And it's totally chill. Like, I absolutely love it. But of course, the only one who has a problem with it is Toma. And it's not that Toma, for a second I wondered if Toma was maybe jealous of Arashi, because Arashi's like right on top of Maki. Like, Arashi is hanging out like right beside Maki, and he eats all the food, and they're like, dude, you ate all the food, and Maki's like, well, just make more, you know, like, it's not a big deal. And for a second I thought maybe Toma was jealous, but it's really not that. It's not that Toma's jealous, it's that Toma doesn't know, he feels like he can't interact and have fun with a group, which is really interesting. And I can kind of relate to Toma. I'm definitely more of a small group person. Like, when I'm in big crowds of people, I have no clue what to do. I'd rather be with like a group of 3 or 4 than a big group. Like, when there's like in college, there'd be parties of like 20 or 30 people, and I'd be like off in my corner with like 3 or 4 people because I didn't want to be like, he makes the comment, I don't know how to just slip in. And that's such a nuanced, relatable feeling, how to slip into the group. Because there are some people that they can just instantly be in a giant group of people and socialize like it's nothing, and it's so natural. Like, Maki has that ability. Maki just instantly talks to people and instantly connects. Like, Arashi makes a comment about the noodles, and he eats all the noodles, and it could be really awkward, but Maki's like, no, we'll just cook more. Here, help me out. And just instantly is like a perfect host. Like, everything's great. But Toma makes a comment, and Yuta picks up on it. Yuta's very aware of how other people feel. Like, he's that way with Mitsu, he's that way with Toma, he's that with Rintaro. Yuta's really good at picking up on people's feelings. But he comments that, you know, Toma's all by himself over there. And I love that line that Toma's like, it's just hard for me to slip into a group setting and feel like it's natural and feel like you're not intruding. And that is such a relatable feeling. Like, even if you're not an introvert, I feel like everybody goes to that moment in a social setting where you maybe weren't originally invited, or you just kind of showed up and you're with a group and you don't feel like you belong with them. Like, that's such a relatable feeling. Oh my gosh. That's just, the moment he had that conversation with Yuta, I'm like, I can relate 100% to this, and I know what that feels like. And I don't think I've watched an anime where people have had that conversation, where they've talked about that feeling. And so it was like, almost got chills. I was like, oh man, I know what that's like. And then he's like, I feel like it's twisted. He feels like I'm twisted thinking that. And it's like, no, you're not. That's a very normal feeling to have. But what I like about the show is that it's dealing with these complex situations and emotions that these characters are having. And it's relatable, but they're just talking it out. Like, I love that conversation with Yuta, and that this show is going into themes and discussions that, one, you don't see in a sports anime usually, if at all, or rarely, but 2, that you don't really see in any anime, to be honest. And the facial expressions between Toma and Yuta in that moment were really, really good. Like, I loved those. I loved how soft they both looked. It was a really interesting expression. And then the little chocolates. That was such an interesting story, because, like, everybody, I feel like this group, they've all kind of talked about each other's home lives to an extent, but Maki makes it sound so like it's nothing. He's like, our old apartment had cockroaches in it, and my mom would pay me 10 yen to find a bunch of cockroaches, and chopsticks are the best way to get them. And you can tell everybody's just like, Shinjo's expression, he's like, what did you do? He's like, you know, you guys should do it sometime. Like, don't you have cockroaches in your apartment? Like, I feel like Maki just gives that information like it's nothing. And then the sponsor, if you look in the episodes, the sponsor, Taki, is just like right within earshot. So you can hear everything, and he can hear Maki. So, you know, as the adult in the room, the other kids probably think that it's just gross and weird, but that story is giving Taki a lot of context into Maki's home life. And as an adult and as a sponsor, that little tiny bit of information speaks volumes. And that's so incredible. the way that it's framed, because right after, like Mitsu puts the meat down, she's like, and right after that story, he's like, hey, since we're all stuffed now, let's do a victory cheer. Let's get our mind off of the fact that Maki just revealed something really personal about his home life that we don't want the other kids to bully him about. I don't think any of these kids would bully Maki about it, but it's something very personal that he revealed like it was nothing. And so I think the sponsor's like, let's get our minds off of that. Let's not think about that. Let's do a victory cheer instead. And he's like, Toma, Captain, get over here. And then I love that they let Arashi join in as well. That's so cool. And he's like, let's aim to win the summer tournament. Yeah. And then Arashi doesn't argue with it. They just dance around, and Mitsu and Kamui are like, you guys have fun with that. It was so sweet. So freaking sweet. I loved it. And at the very end, there's whoever this jerk parent is trying to destroy their good time. Nope, not having it. Not having it at all. But man, yeah, this was the best episode of the season so far. If the rest of the season is like this episode, hell yeah, I'm all here for it. But that episode was really, really good. I instantly want to go back and rewatch it now, because for the match, for the barbecue, for the conversation, for the animation on Toma and Yuta, for all of it. It was so subtle in a lot of areas, but really, really well done in just all the symbolism and metaphors are getting across in just that one episode. That was really good. Really, really good. So yeah! Holy cow, that's probably the most I've discussed about this series so far, but I really, really enjoyed that. So I'm curious to know what y'all thought down below too with this episode. Please no spoilers, but I'm really curious to know what your guys' thoughts were about the episode, about the different themes, about the match, about Maki's story, about Yuta and Toma's conversation, about Mitsu and her kind of change of character, about the parent complaining, about Arashi being there, all of that. That was so, about Itsuki joy. There was so much that happened in this episode. It was crazy. All the plot things. I love it. So yeah, I hope y'all enjoyed this episode. I'm so curious to know your thoughts down below, but this best episode of the season so far, by far. I'm really excited to see where it goes to from here. But with that being said, I hope y'all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe and take care. And I'll be back next week with episode 8 of Stars Align. Bye.